Welcome to Next Femme Leaders, a podcast for conscious, ambitious women who want to make a real impact with their careers without losing themselves or their well-being in the process. I'm Isabel, your host, a leadership coach with over 13 years of corporate experience. I know how hard it is to lead in systems not built for us, especially if you're introvert, kind, intuitive, or spiritual. So here, each week, I will share tools that blend the practical and the mystical, the feminine and the masculine, so that you can lead with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. If you know in your bones you're meant for much more, you are in the right place. So let's start. Welcome, beautiful woman, to episode number 8 of the Next Femme Leader podcast. As always, thank you so much for being part of this beautiful community. It means the world to me to be walking this journey together. Last week, we had our beautiful masterclass, Leading with Confidence, What is Really Holding You Back. If you miss it, you can still register to receive the recording. It was such a powerful space where we went deep into what's actually behind confidence in your career. Probably know what you think, but what research and my work with women have consistently shown again and again. So if you miss it, you can check the link in the show notes. And today I'm bringing a very spiritual topic. As you know, the goal of this podcast is to blend both the practical with the mystical, the feminine and the masculine, and everything that comes with your leadership journey. And when we say leader, we're not just talking about someone managing a team. We're talking about you, the leader of your own life, your career, your impact in the world, whatever shape that takes. And today we're going fully into the mystical. So here I was, literally in the shower, when I got this strong insight that I had to bring this to the podcast. And if you have been around for a while, you know that when that happens, I know that it's because one of you probably needs to hear. I believe we manifest each other all the time. And in fact, one of the questions that came from the community recently was about how to deal with resistance at work. So today I'm not really going to give you a traditional answer here. What I want to offer you instead are insights that come from my spiritual and energy work with women. And today I want to talk about something that's rarely discussed, but that deeply affects how you show up in your career and leadership. And this is the feminine collective wounds. So each of us belong to different collectives, energetically. So I, for example, belong to the Uruguayan collective, to the Latin collective, and also to the Dutch collective since I live here now. But all of us who identify as women, we also belong to the feminine collective. And the feminine collective carries wounds, emotional, spiritual, and energetic patterns that pass down through generations due to historical and cultural oppression of the feminine energy and expression. So today I want to talk about 4 of those wounds and how they might be showing up at work in your leadership, and how can you start healing them as well. So we will discuss the silence wound, the witch wound, the womb wound, and the sisterhood wound. When I started working with women, I was also studying yoga, and I fell in love with the chakra theory. At some point, I came across something from an energy healer who also worked with women and their businesses. And she shared that the chakras she sees blocked the most in women are the throat chakra and the sacral chakra. And that made so much sense to me based on all the coaching and women's circles I have been part of. So the throat chakra is connected to communicating your truth to the world. And the sacred chakra, your womb area, is the sexual chakra related to creativity, sexuality, and pleasure. So let's start with the first feminine collective wound, the silence wound. The silence wound comes from generations of women being silenced. Historically and culturally, women's voices have been dismissed or punished. Social conditioning teaches us to be nice, quiet, and avoid conflict, and ask permission even to go to the toilet when we are kids. Many generations of women before us were punished or dismissed just for speaking their truth. And you might be asking yourself, okay, Isa, but what does that have to do with me? I didn't live in a world where women were punished for speaking up. Or maybe sometimes what I heard is that didn't happen in my family, I was encouraged. First, the truth is we all live in that world, because in many parts of the world, women still can safely speak up. But also, this is exactly where generational trauma comes in. There has been research, just like the work of Mark Walling, that explain this really well. In his book, It Didn't Start With You, he talks about how trauma is often stored as a kind of implicit, non-declarative memory in our brains, meaning that we carry it without consciously knowing it, and that this can pass down up to 3 or 4 generations. I really love this book and I really recommend it. And he also explained that scientists had done studies with rats where they exposed one generation to a traumatic smell paired with a shock. And the incredible part, even their descendants who never experienced the shock show a fear response to that smell. This shows how trauma can be inherited biologically, not just emotionally or socially. And just think, only 2 or 3 generations ago, women didn't have many rights at all, not even the right to vote. And that history stays alive in our collective memory. So even if you didn't experience that yourself, the silence wound is very real and very present. One of the first signs I see in women in my programs, where I know what we have been working on, looking into their belief systems, into their inner saboteurs, is paying off, is that they start speaking up more. They might dare to have an uncomfortable conversation, raise concerns about a project, or say something that calls their courage in and challenge their people-pleasing part. It might be a subtle change, but that's exactly how I know we are on a great track, because that muscle with training becomes confidence and authenticity. The silence wound affects your throat chakra, the center of communication and self-expression. So you might notice signs like fear of speaking up, people-pleasing, avoiding conflict, feeling unheard or unseen, or even physical symptoms like throat tightness or jaw tension. And healing this wound means practicing safe expression. This can be through journaling or speaking in trusted spaces. And for me, really, starting my Instagram account where I share my spiritual journey was a huge part of my healing. Even this podcast is a part of it as well. One woman in my program even realized her own healing journey when she started her podcast as well. Because the act of putting yourself out there and sharing your message is absolutely healing. So now you don't have to jump from 0 to full 10 right away. So maybe just challenge yourself today to share a little bit more of your truth. Maybe to share a part of you that you have been holding back. Even if this is in your own journal, before sharing it to the world, I actually start writing for myself. Other practices that might help you to heal this wound are voice activation practices like chanting, singing, or humming. And you might also want to use affirmations, just like my voice matters. And of course, this is something we dive deeply into our programs. And if you get the chance, I encourage you to invest in spaces where you can develop your ability to share your truth. And it is actually something that the women attending my women's circles often say that they start noticing with time, because, of course, as everything, this also comes more natural with practice. So it's really important to find safe spaces where you can start proactively sharing your truth. And this way, really start challenging our inner belief that our voice doesn't matter. The second wound I want to discuss today with you is the witch wound. This is very connected to the silence wound, but still different. This is one that my community and I have been healing together for the last few years, and honestly, I wasn't even fully aware of it until I started reading more about it. When I did, I thought, wow, this is why what we are doing is so powerful. If you're here listening, my beautiful woman, you probably have an inner witch that has been developing recently too. The witch wound comes from the historical persecution of women healers, spiritual leaders, or anyone seen as different. It's rooted in cultural fear of feminine power and intuition. This is why intuition remains such a big topic for women, because we feel it so deeply, but often we don't know how to use it or even if to trust it, and many of us keep it as a secret. So many decisions in my life came from my gut, but when people ask me, I felt the need to provide them a rational reason, when actually it was really intuition. And both the silence wound and the witch wound bring a lot of fear around visibility. This is something I love talking about because it has been such a personal challenge, and I see it a lot in the women I work with. Being visible is something I work on continuously. Not only being visible, but feeling safe being visible. Even stepping into a new level with this podcast, my fear come back, and I can feel, even in my body, it feels dangerous and vulnerable. The witch wound impacts the solar plexus chakra, your personal power center, as well as the third eye chakra, which is about intuition. It also touches the throat and sacral chakras. Because in some way, sharing your intuition and your spiritual abilities is also part of sharing your truth. So, signs that you have been this wound include fear of being visible, fear of being powerful, hiding your spiritual gifts of leadership abilities, self doubt in yourself despite your talent or intuition, and feeling isolated from other women. And healing the witch wound means reclaiming your spiritual power through rituals and meditation, doing the shadow work to confront fear and shame, and also joining communities that honor feminine power. Of course, you're also doing this by joining this community through this podcast and learning more about these topics. Of course, working with your intuition is also practice, and it also comes easier with time, but it's really tapping into having spaces where you don't rationalize everything and you just try to get in touch with what you feel towards something, what you feel in your body, what feelings is coming, what is your gut telling you. And also, of course, meditation, rituals that also give you space for connecting with your third eye, for connecting with visions. But be fully aware that the more you tap into this part of you, the easier it will be to connect with this intuition. And the reason I want to talk about these wounds is that personally I have always been very intuitive. And when I start my spiritual practices, such as meditation, yoga, I start having every time more insights, every time more visions. And I got really scared. So, really understanding that this was a wound from our collective, that this is something that has been carried by women before me, by my mother, by my grannies, and that actually was the case for my mother. This was a part that she had very developed and at the same time feel very ashamed of. So understanding that for me is always give me compassion because I know where it's coming from. And it also gives me courage because healing this is also transcending and also using this gift that we have, which are so powerful tools for our leadership journeys. And we'll talk more about intuition because I really want to tap in an episode fully into it. But I wanted to bring you this idea also that you know what is going on. When you're afraid of these parts of you, when you're afraid of what is coming and if it's real or not, if you can trust it or not. The third one I want to mention is the womb wound. And this wound comes from trauma, shame, or taboo around the body, sexuality, menstruation, childbirth. It's also tied to the devaluation of feminine cycles and emotions we have in our society. And these are all topics that are so natural for women and that we still find as taboos. We still don't talk about, we still find like menstruation is something dirty, something shameful. The womb wound lives in your sacral chakra, the seat of all your emotions, creativity, and sensuality. And signs of this wound show up as shame or disconnection from your body or your sexuality, emotional numbness or overwhelm, physical issues like painful periods or pelvic tension, or creative blocks. And there is many ways we can heal this wound. And again, for me, bringing you this information is also bringing you the awareness. So we can heal this through practices such as meditation, visualization, and also connecting with our sensuality, connecting with our creativity. Movement and dance are really good practices for this. And all these wounds, what they have in common, if you have been following, is that they reject the feminine energy. So any practice that really connects you with your feminine side, the creativity, doing things with your hands, the movement in the body, they are also allowing you to heal these wounds. Emotional release through journaling or therapy is so important as well. And emotions is really something that we're not used to manage, and that sometimes we hold so much shame for some of them. We don't allow ourselves to be sometimes sad or to grieve or sometimes to be really angry. I personally have realized in the last few weeks that I was not allowing space for my anger. And it took me to really be conscious about it and give a space through journaling to really connect back to this anger, to really give it space and not keeping rejecting it and telling myself I shouldn't be angry. So this wound is in our collective. I personally never suffered and abused myself, but a few years ago I realized how I still was carrying trauma in this regard. This showed up as fear of walking alone in the night, also reacting very bad to any movie or series where rapes appear. And every time a woman in my circles bring either abuse or miscarriage or eating disorders, I always say that by healing yourself, you're also healing the community. And by sharing in vulnerability about these topics, we are all healing. We are all healing this collective wound. An affirmation to heal this wound can be, my body is sacred. And as a last note, I would add that every time you're learning about your menstruation, about your body as a woman, about your sexuality, your pleasure, you are healing this wound. And the last wound I want to talk today is the sisterhood wound. I have always wondered why we don't talk about female competition in the workplace. Personally, the best and the worst managers I have had were women. And most of the times I had issues at work, it was with women. And that always made me a bit sad because men often have each other's back. But sometimes I feel like we women can be our own worst enemies. I have learned this varies by culture. From the women I work with, in some cultures, the sisterhood wound is even more present than in others. And I used to wonder why this topic isn't discussed more, as every time I mention it, it seemed I was not alone on it. And when I go deeper into female leadership, I realized that we might not share more about this because it can play us against. The reality is that research shows that there are more women helping women than fighting, and that the women are catty stereotype doesn't really serve us anymore. When I was back in Uruguay this year in March, this topic came a lot. I did a few women's workshops, and one of the main comments was how amazing the energy feels in the room full of women, and if only we had that same energy at work. And since then, I have been wondering if it's worth talking about it here. I believe it's a topic that needs more space than a post, and the podcast seems like a great space to start. So, the sisterhood wound comes from the patriarchal divide and conquer tactics that foster mistrust and competition among women. It's not that long ago that for us to survive we depend on a man, first our father and later our husband or brother. So we were in some way rivals. Also, in the time of witches being burned, we were also rewarded from betraying each other. So it comes really from culture and conditioning, encouraging women to see each other as rivals rather than allies. And from internalized jealousy, comparison, or fear of vulnerability. This wound affects the heart chakra, the center of connection, compassion, and relationships. And you might notice difficult trusting or bonding with other women, feelings of jealousy or competition, avoiding vulnerability or authentic connection, and even self-sabotage in sisterhood or female communities. Recently, a woman told me, I see women's circles and sisterhood being mentioned all the time in social media. Women for women, women supporting women. But as much as I want, I don't believe it. I don't trust it. And I want to be really honest with you here. I have witnessed so much competition in women around me. And what has changed in the last few years is that I became conscious and proactive on the type of women I surround myself with. The more I show up who I am, the more I attract the type of women I want around. But of course, this didn't come without seeing competition. In fact, being a yoga teacher last year for a few months, I actually witnessed how the same yoga teachers that promote women's spaces didn't act always as a sister when I did a mistake. It happened to me a few times and it got me a bit shocked because I was not expecting it in that environment. Now, the fact that I know there is a wound between us makes me compassionate, but it doesn't mean I have to have those women around. So I have consciously decided the type of women I want to be myself, and I keep myself accountable of my own standards, and at the same time, the type of women I want to be surrounded by. And when someone demonstrates me isn't in the same spirit, I don't blame them or shame them, but I will proactively take space. I have also learned in life to give second chances to people, and finally, some female colleagues that in the past were women that I felt competitive and maybe not fully transparent with me have ended working with me as a coach years later. And I have seen a different side of them because we are all in this healing process and in our own journeys, and I do believe people grow. So, what could you do if you have a competitive female colleague around you? My advice is always don't try to beat hate with more hate, because that's a recipe for a disaster, in my view. I believe the only way to beat darkness is by shining light on. So first, you might want to do the mirror exercise that we actually discussed in episode 6 and ask yourself, what is this reflecting on you? And what is the learning here? In some situations, the better approach is to try to improve the communication with a conversation. And in some situations, the better approach is to take space. This will depend on how much you value the relationship, how close it is to your daily work, that you might want to take one or other alternatives. Another tool I use a lot when relationship with somebody is complicated is the meta meditation, where basically you send love first to someone you love, after to yourself, then to someone neutral, and later to someone you find hard to love. Through this meta meditation practice, of course, you're working on your heart center. This practice has worked wonders to me, to the point that I practiced it with colleagues that were very annoying and our relationship started shifting. If you are here, you know we are energy, and we don't have to say that we don't tolerate a colleague for her to notice it. And sometimes when we change, the environment also changes as a reaction. So if you're curious about this practice, I will also leave a link to my own meta meditation practice in Insight Timer in the show notes. You can use this app for free and this meditation for free as well. Now, this is if you have a competitive woman around, but what happens if you are the one feeling competitive or comparing yourself to other women? I have also been there, and that's opportunity to heal. And again, you might want to ask yourself, what is the learning here? I remember when I was 30 and I had to look for roommates, and I proactively looked to live with men because I repeat to myself that women were more complicated. And later in my journey, I discovered I had to heal my feminine. I had my entire adult life rejecting my feminine side. And here I don't mean feminine as in a sexy way, but the side of me that is compassionate, soft, calm, the part of my life where I need to rest, the side of me that is creative. For many years, I just reward and tap into the side of me that was determined, strong, practical, organized, my masculine. These are all amazing parts of me, but the real power lies in the integration. I have an episode planned on feminine and masculine energies and how to heal them, so we'll tap on this later. But to heal the sisterhood wound, practice open-hearted connection with women. Celebrate their wins and build emotional intimacy. Join a circle or women events. Since I lead women event, I think the question I get the most is, why just women? Don't we need men for change? And I think we need both for different reasons. We need spaces with diverse opinions and representations for a more sustainable world. But as women, we also need spaces where we can heal these wounds together. And honestly, I'm not sure we can do this in a diverse space. So my advice would be, find spaces where you can heal with other women. Create or join sacred spaces for women to support one each other. And start getting happy for other women's successes, celebrating them, because they are not taking you anything. They are actually showing you what is possible for us. Every time she wins, we all win. Our collective wins. So as you know, I want to keep this episode short and sweet. So we are wrapping up. So just as a final word, you don't need to heal all these wounds at once. Just start by identifying what's the one that feels most alive for you today. That's usually your entry point. These wounds aren't a flaw in you, they are part of our collective story, and by healing them, we're rising together. So let me know which wound you're currently healing, I would love to know which one resonated most, and I hope this episode helped you feel less alone in your journey. We'll keep waving the practical and the mysticals because I believe that's what makes your leadership whole. So, beautiful woman, thank you so much for being here. If this touched you, please share it with a sister. A great way to heal this wound is by doing the work with other women. So, with that, I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, let me know on Instagram at nextfemleaders or send your thoughts and reflections to info@isabelfonseca.com. I truly would love to hear from you. And if it resonates with you, I would be so grateful if you left a review or a comment so that it helps more conscious, ambitious women to find this space. And please don't keep it for yourself, send it to another woman you know who needs to hear this message today. See you next Monday at 8 a.m. Until then, keep leading with your truth and remember, you already are an ex-fem leader.